My girlfriend went to get milk and never returned. I'm a 25-year-old guy from the US, and my ex, who's 22, is from the Philippines. We were together for 4 years, and looking back, I now realize there were things I ignored, things I probably shouldn't have. But I always tried to be a trusting, non-controlling partner. I never wanted to be the type of person who constantly worries about whether their significant other is cheating. Sure, the thought crossed my mind from time to time, but I always reminded myself that obsessing over it wasn't healthy. She never gave me a concrete reason to suspect she was being unfaithful, so I chose to trust her. We met in person multiple times, and we were in the process of bringing her over to live with me permanently. Everything seemed to be on track for a future together. Then, one day, she sent me a message saying she was going to the grocery store and would be back later. The way she worded it felt off to me, so, half-jokingly, I replied, "It sounds like you're never coming back." She laughed and said something like, "You think that, wouldn't you?" She never came back. She pulled the classic disappearing act, the old dad went to get milk trick, but for real. At first, I was terrified. Her family was just as shocked as I was, frantically messaging me to ask if I knew where she was. We feared the worst, an accident, a kidnapping, or something even more horrible. The thought of seeing her face on a missing persons poster haunted me. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I spiraled into panic. Then the truth came out. She had left me for another guy. And as painful as that was, it still wasn't nearly as bad as the pure, gut-wrenching fear of not knowing if she was safe. Being cheated on sucks, no question about it, but it's still infinitely better than thinking someone you love might be dead. Once I knew she was alive and had left by choice, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. But that relief quickly turned into realization. She wasn't the person I thought she was. Hindsight is a brutal teacher. Looking back, there were red flags, subtle, easy-to-overlook moments that should have raised alarms. But what was I supposed to do? I did my best. I tried to be a supportive, understanding boyfriend while also giving her the space to live her life. And yeah, that can backfire. Some people will do what they're going to do, no matter how much you trust them. But this story doesn't end there. After everything that happened, I started talking to her sister, who's 23. She was the only one in her family who really stood by me. She was kind, supportive, and genuinely felt terrible about what her sister had done. When I asked if she had noticed any signs beforehand, she admitted that there were small things, odd behaviors, fleeting glances, little inconsistencies, but nothing obvious enough to sound an alarm. When my ex finally did reach out to her family, she bluntly told them she wasn't coming back. Then, she told her sister to block me. But her sister didn't. Instead, she stood up for me. She confronted her, asking, "How could you do this to him? Do you even care about how he feels?" My ex's response? "He'll figure it out soon enough." That was the moment I knew, without a doubt, that she wasn't a good person. It's funny, really. Throughout our relationship, she would sometimes say things like, "I don't deserve you." Back then, I thought she was just insecure. But now, I realize it was guilt. She had been hiding something all along. And what could I have done differently? Nothing. I'm only human. You can't force someone to be a decent person. Then, things took an even crazier turn. A few months after the breakup, I started dating her sister. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something out of a soap opera. But it just happened naturally. She's different, sweeter, more open, and, for the first time in a long time, I feel genuinely valued in a relationship. I had to ask myself, was I doing this just to get back at my ex? Was this some twisted form of revenge? The answer is no. Has it crossed my mind that my ex might see it that way? Sure. And apparently, she did, because the moment she found out, she blocked her sister completely. So, I guess in her eyes, we're both the bad guys now. But honestly, I don't care. Life is too short to waste on people who don't care about you. Sister, protect your personal and banking information. I hope she's legitimate, but you never truly know. There's always a chance she might not even be your sister. Do a background check, discreetly. Now, let me share another story, one that still haunts me. I found out my ex-girlfriend was pregnant by another man after she ghosted me for months. For those who have experienced betrayal, I regret to say that my story might surpass yours. But maybe, in sharing it, I can help someone else move on. My last relationship was a whirlwind, beautiful at first, then utterly devastating. I met this woman several years ago, and she made me believe in the idea of soulmates. I genuinely thought she was the one. She even flew across the country to be with me, leaving her life behind. At the time, she meant everything to me. We shared everything, our thoughts, our struggles, our love. She was my confidant, my partner, my home. For the first year, things were incredible. Then, suddenly, everything shifted. The loving, affectionate woman I knew became someone I didn't recognize. She became abusive, both emotionally and physically. I had never been spat on before, but she changed that. I had never been shoved against a wall and urged to retaliate by the woman I loved, but she changed that too. She lied so effortlessly, as if it were second nature. It was terrifying how easily deception flowed from her lips without the slightest hesitation. The few times I caught her in a lie, she would break down, crying, begging me not to leave. And unfortunately, I always forgave her. Looking back, I should have left the moment she laid a hand on me. But I stayed, partly out of fear, partly out of guilt. She had given up her life in another state for me, and I felt an obligation to make it work. As time passed, intimacy between us faded. She stopped wanting to be with me physically, and it shattered my self-worth. I felt unloved, unwanted, and completely alone. I expressed my concerns repeatedly, but my words never seemed to reach her. I told her that if she wasn't willing to be intimate, I would have to seek it elsewhere. To my surprise, she agreed. That was the beginning of the end. We stayed together, but I started sleeping with other people. Each encounter left me feeling emptier than before. Worse, the women I was with would develop feelings for me, and I felt like I was hurting them too. This continued for over a year, a cycle of guilt, resentment, and detachment. During that time, my ex's career began to take off. With every new success, I noticed her patience with me thinning. The smallest things would irritate her, and our arguments grew more frequent. One night, in the middle of a heated fight, she snapped, "Why don't you just break up with me, then?" And that's when it hit me. She wanted out. She had already moved on in her mind. I asked if she was seeing someone else. She denied it. Another lie. We decided to separate and live apart. That argument was the last time I ever saw her. A few months later, in November, we had planned to meet for dinner. I showed up. She didn't. That was the final straw. After being stood up, I cut all contact. And for a while, I was doing okay. I was healing, moving forward. Then, one night, everything unraveled. I was about to head to the gym when I opened Instagram and started mindlessly scrolling through stories. That's when I saw her, on a friend's IG story, doing a photo shoot. But something was different. Her stomach was noticeably distended. She was pregnant. In that moment, the world around me went silent. It was like the floor had been ripped from beneath me. The months of pain from being ghosted paled in comparison to this. I cried for weeks. I had given her years of my life, endured her abuse, stayed when I should have left, and this was how it ended. I immediately blocked her on everything. Her phone number, social media, every possible means of communication. But even after cutting ties, I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. For a long time, dark thoughts consumed me. I had never experienced so much rage toward another person. I considered things I never thought I was capable of. Therapy helped, but I was terrified to fully open up about my thoughts, fearing they would alert the authorities. I tried everything, crying it out, intense workouts, martial arts. But every morning, I woke up with that gnawing urge for revenge. And yet, I knew deep down that revenge would only prolong my suffering. I had to let go. I had to heal. What happened, happened. I ignored the warning signs. I stayed too long. But in the end, I got out. And that is what I must hold on to. Now, I recognize the face of a narcissist. Every day, I wake up and fight a silent battle, smiling through the pain, convincing myself that one day it will all be okay. And I have to believe that it will. TLDR. My ex-girlfriend ghosted me for months, only for me to later discover, through Instagram, that she was pregnant by another man.